When I first visited the US as a Prime Minister, India was the 10th largest economy in the world. 10th. Today, India is the 5th largest economy.
India remains the fastest growing major economy in the world.
सरकार ने रूफटॉप सोलर की बहुत बड़ी योजना का ऐलान किया है.
India is a middle power on its way, according to some specialists, to become a great power, a superpower.
India has recently announced plans to enhance solar power in the country, aligned with its broader push for sustainability.
Hi everybody, the Modi 3.0 government has made a bold promise to India, and that is a commitment to become the third largest economy in the third term of Narendra Modi.
तीसरे टर्म में दुनिया की पहली 3 इकोनॉमीज में एक नाम भारत का होगा. हमारे सामने अगले 25 साल का लक्ष्य है. हम भारत को विकसित भारत बनाने वाले.
And while most people are extremely excited about it, there is one big problem for India. And because of this one problem, inflation in India is increasing, we are being bullied by America and Europe, and most importantly, our companies are not able to compete in the global market. This problem is the problem of oil dependency. Now, the most straightforward solution to this is obviously renewable energy, which is why the Modi government has tried several policies to boost the Indian solar industry.
1 करोड़ परिवारों को सोलर रूफटॉप लगाने के लिए सरकार मदद करेगी.
In the field of energy sector, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the Prime Minister Suryodaya scheme.
The government launched the scheme PM Kusum on 19th February 2019. Scheme aims to enhance their income, de-dieselize the farm sector and reduce environmental pollution.
But you know what, guys? As much as I would love to believe that India could become a superpower, the bad news is that China is dumping in India. And as I've consistently stated, India is dangerously dependent on China. You don't believe me? Look at this chart. The solar panel production has 4 stages: polysilicon, ingot wafer, solar cells and solar modules. And China has done such an incredible job that in January, a research unit of the European Commission calculated that Chinese companies could make solar panels for just 16 to 18.9 cents per watt, whereas Europeans could produce it at 24.3 to 30 cents per watt, and US companies could produce them at 28 cents per watt. So a Chinese module is 50% cheaper than Europe and 65% cheaper than US. This is the reason why not just India, but even US and Europe are dependent on China. But you know what, guys? There is one big piece of good news here. While I was going through my research, I found that there is one Indian company that is finding ways to break this monopoly of China. And soon, this company is planning for the biggest IPO in the entire renewable energy space. And if successful, this company could be our Brahmastra to challenge the Chinese dependency. Why? Because if you look at this graph, while Mundra, which is owned by Adani's, it has a capacity of 4 gigawatt. Vikram Solar stands at 3.5 gigawatt, whereas this company alone stands at 13.3 gigawatt. So it has 3 times the capacity as that of the Adani's. Similarly, in FY23, while the revenue growth of Adani's Mundra was minus 12%, Vikram Solar stood at minus 7%, Tata Power stood at minus 19%, whereas this company experienced a positive revenue growth of 136%. And the cherry on the cake is that they also experienced a net profit growth of 538%. This company is not an Adani or a Reliance or a Tata company, but a company with a unique name called Waaree Energies.
Largest manufacturer of solar PV modules, Waaree Renewables.
India का largest solar panel manufacturer with 30 years warranty.
Waaree Energies has posted significant growth in its financial performance over the 3 years.
The group has the biggest market share in the domestic market.
So the question over here is, when the entire world is dependent on China, how is this Indian company trying to beat China? How are they so far ahead of the Tatas and Adanis of India? What exactly is their business strategy that makes them India's Brahmastra to the Chinese domination? And most importantly, what are the business lessons that we need to learn from the incredible rise of Waaree Energies? Before we continue, let me introduce you to our education partners of today's episode, and that is Odoo. People, Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that provides a range of applications to simplify your day-to-day business management. Running a business is very tough, and managing your finances should not add to this stress. Now imagine if accounting could be as easy as your daily routine. With Odoo Accounting, that dream becomes reality. Odoo's comprehensive accounting tool handles everything from invoicing to reporting. Its user-friendly interface seamlessly syncs with your bank, automates multi-currency transactions, and generates detailed reports with just a few clicks. Whether you oversee one company or many, Odoo Accounting scales with your business. It keeps your finances sorted and compliant. Odoo Accounting also automatically records invoices with the help of AI, and it does bank reconciliation at a much faster rate. Also, 95% of your transactions are automatically matched with the financial records. Odoo Accounting offers a variety of customizable reports such as balance sheets, profit and loss statements, cash flow statements, and many more. And here's the best part. Odoo provides lifetime free access for your first application with unlimited hosting and support and a free custom domain for a year. So if this sounds useful to you, check out the link in the description and download Odoo now. People, to understand the global solar power industry, we first need to understand the solar value chain. So if you look at this chart, the solar value chain starts with silica, which makes up almost 60% of the Earth's crust. So silica is first mined and purified to make polysilicon. This polysilicon is first made into large cylindrical blocks called ingots, and then these ingots are turned into thin discs called wafers. These wafers then undergo processing to be turned into solar cells. And when these cells are framed and assembled together, they make up a solar panel. This solar panel is installed in our houses and industries. And if you look at China, China is the leader in all these stages. And out of the 9 million tons of silicon produced in the world, in 2023, 6.6 million tons were produced only in China. And if you look at where India stands, India only produced 60,000 tons in comparison. Then 83% of the world's polysilicon produced in 2023 was only produced in China. And even when it comes to the rest of the value chain, from ingots to wafers to solar cells and even modules, China controls more than 80% of this entire value chain. Now when it comes to India, we imported 100% of our wafers in 2021 from China because our own production of polysilicon, ingots and wafers was virtually zero. So the question over here is, how is China able to dominate this entire supply chain, and why has no country been able to compete with China? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The Chinese government started subsidizing their manufacturing way back in 2009 itself. And while other countries were busy giving subsidies to buy solar panels, Chinese companies were getting subsidies to manufacture solar panels. So everybody in the world wanted to buy solar panels but not make a solar panel. Whereas the Chinese only wanted to make and sell solar panels. And this is how the Chinese achieved insane economies of scale, because of which today the Chinese are able to produce the cheapest solar panels in the world. Secondly, China practically produces all of the world's equipment for manufacturing solar panels, and the supply of every component of solar panels, from wafers to special glass, all of it comes from China. So because of this, if you look at China's growth in the market share in the global shipment of PV cells, it increased from 5% in 2004 to 90% in 2024. I repeat, from 5% in 2004 to 90% in 2024. And lastly, the low cost of labor and low cost of electricity helped the solar industry of China to grow at an exponential rate. This is how, by entering the market too early, by subsidizing the Chinese companies to manufacture while everybody else was buying, by controlling the manufacturing know-how, and eventually by using cheap labor, China became a monopoly in the solar space of the world.
China was one of the first countries to realize the potential of solar panels.
China was going all in. Solar energy will be the dominant source of renewable energy by the end of the decade, and the world is dependent on China for the technology.
And today, China is growing at such a staggering rate that China's PV module making capacity is increasing at a CAGR of 38%, whereas all other countries combined are growing at just 26%. this is the market domination on which the Chinese companies stand. So the question over here is, when the Chinese have such a strong monopoly, how is Waaree helping India break through this monopoly? Well, here's why, ladies and gentlemen, Waaree Energies is making a bold attempt to protect India from the Chinese influence. Well, the answer to it lies in its efficiency and operations. So let's first start with understanding what exactly does Waaree Energy offer to the market. If you look at Waaree's portfolio, they offer a range of products and services like solar PV modules, inverters, batteries, rooftop solutions to even EPC services or engineering, procurement and construction services. In simple words, whether you are a homeowner, factory owner or a restaurant owner, if you ask Waaree to set up a solar plant for you, Waaree will take care of everything from engineering to purchase to installation end to end. So you don't have to go to different vendors. Waaree alone will help you out end to end. So if this basic understanding is very clear to you, let's understand the business strategies that make Waaree an incredible player in the solar space against the Chinese companies. The first superpower that they are building is their manufacturing capacity. So Waaree Energies realized that on the global stage, there is a premium on capacity creation for two reasons. Number one, when a company increases capacity, the cost of producing solar panels decreases. So as we produce more and more panels, we will get closer to the Chinese prices. Number two, achieving this scale is pretty easy today because the global demand for solar panels is shooting up every single day. So it opens up the gateway to increase your profit. The second superpower that Waaree is building is their supply chain security. For those who don't know, if you look at the market today, Chinese products have been cheaper and they've been trusted by the Indian vendors for a very long time. So Indian PV module manufacturers often prefer buying all their raw materials from China. But if the entire Indian ecosystem is over-reliant on China, it creates a big risk for India. And here's where China's evil dumping strategy comes in. For those who don't know, dumping is when a country deliberately sells its products at a dirt cheap price such that it becomes impossible for the domestic market to survive. For example, if a Chinese company sells solar cells for $4 and an Indian company starts manufacturing at $2 and sells the same product at the same $4, then obviously because this product is made in India, all the Indian companies would buy from the Indian manufacturer, right? But here's where the Chinese would suddenly start selling the same product at just $1.5. And obviously, the Indian company won't be able to sell at $1.5 because it costs them $2 just to manufacture. And this is the reason why it becomes impossible for the Indian companies to make a profit or to even sustain in the market. And because of this, it becomes impossible for the Indian company to match the Chinese prices. So when the Chinese products are available at such dirt cheap price, what will happen? All the Indian clients will switch back to the Chinese supplier. And this Indian company will incur so much losses that eventually it will shut down. But after this company shuts down, the Chinese would again increase the price to $4 so that they can continue to make a profit. This is what you call as dumping. And this is the reason why Waaree is taking a bold step to vertically integrate all the elements of the supply chain in India itself. Which means in the supply chain, they would be producing everything from ingots to wafers to solar cells to even solar modules. So if Waaree ends up building this supply chain for India, it could practically become a monopoly with a huge leverage in the solar supply chain of India. And my sense is that the moment the Modi government senses that India has the capacity to manufacture ingots, they will exponentially increase the import duty on Chinese products. So that way, it would become impossible for the Chinese to enter the Indian market. And whosoever completes this vertical integration, they would go on to become a huge beneficiary of this solar wave of India. This is again why Waaree could be a savior for India. This is a second barrier to entry that Waaree is building. Thirdly, Waaree is building an insane distribution system to reach the remotest corners of India. And to build this distribution, Waaree is using the franchise model to scale all across the country. Today, they have a network of 388 unique franchisees all across the country, which helps them reach even tier 2 and tier 3 cities of India. And lastly, it's the technology. Waaree Energies have the technology which is better than its domestic peers, and in some cases, it is at par or better than its international competitors. For example, nobody in the country has the flexibility in their modules. So if you want to install a solar panel on a low load bearing roof or a dome shaped surface, or even if you want to install a solar panel on a tensile fabric structure, Vari has the technology that can adapt to any surface where regular panels cannot be installed. So do you realize they are building capacity to achieve economies of scale? They are building supply chain security to cut the Chinese dependence, and most importantly, they are using their franchise network to reach out to customers all across India. These are the three superpowers that Vari is building for itself. Now the question over here is, Vari is doing all this, that is fine, but is it even financially viable to be spread across 388 franchisees and have vertical integration without suffering dumping from the Chinese and then make a profit? Well, this is why I got into the DRHP paper of Vari to understand their financials, and this is what it looks like. The first thing I saw is the interest coverage ratio, as in what is the ability of the company to pay its interest expenses from its profits. In simple words, if your earnings before tax and interest is 1 lakh rupees and your interest expense is 50,000 rupees, then your interest coverage ratio is 2, which means you can pay your interest 2 times over with your earnings. So if the interest coverage ratio is less than 1, then it is considered to be risky. If it is 1, then it is considered to be good. And if it is more than 1, then it is considered to be excellent. And this indicator of interest coverage ratio helps us understand 3 very important things about a company, and they are solvency, financial risk, and debt capacity. So number 1, it tells us whether a company can generate enough earnings to cover its interest payments or not. Number 2, it tells us the possibility of the company going bankrupt. And lastly, it tells us the debt capacity of the company, as in it tells us how capable a company is to take up debt for expansion. So the more this ratio, the better it is for the company. So the better is their scope of expansion through debt. Now, if you see the interest coverage ratio in the solar industry, while Adani's Mundra Solar has an interest coverage ratio of 4.5, Vikram Solar stands at 1.8, whereas Vari Energy has an interest coverage ratio of 11 times, which means it is super safe at the moment with respect to its debt, and it has a very high debt capacity to expand further. Secondly, if you look at the revenue and profitability, like I mentioned in the intro, in FY23, while the revenue growth of Adani's Mundra Solar was minus 12%, Vikram Solar stood at minus 7%, Tata Power stood at minus 19%, whereas Vari Energies not only saw a positive revenue growth, it stood at a massive 136% revenue growth. So the question over here is, how is Vari able to do it? Well, one major reason for this is that the company's order books are filled with orders from the United States. If you see this table below, their orders have increased from 0.41 gigawatt in 2021 to 18.06 gigawatt in 2023. That is a 4,308% increase in just 2 years. And if you see their sales, more than 68% are coming from exports, and 96% of it is just United States. So now the question over here is, why are these American companies going to Vari? And the reason is pretty simple. There is a global megatrend called China Plus One strategy, whereby countries all across the world are adopting to decrease their dependence on China. So US companies are decreasing their imports from China and they're increasing their imports from other countries, especially India. So this mega trend is helping the solar manufacturers in India, and Vari just happens to be a beneficiary of it. And lastly, we saw their return on capital employed, and this indicator for Vari stands out as well. For those who don't know, ROCE is nothing but for every 100 rupee that a company invests, how much profit does it generate? So if your company invests 10,000 rupees and generates a revenue of 12,000 rupees, your net profit is 2,000 rupees. So in terms of return on capital employed, it is 2,000 divided by 10,000 equal to 20%. And in general, a return on capital employed of 20% or higher is considered to be excellent, 15 to 19% is considered to be good, 10 to 14% is considered to be average, and less than 5% is considered to be bad. Now, if you look at the return on capital employed for Vari, for FY23, it stands at 31.61%. For Adani's Mundra, it is unknown, but for Websol, it stands at minus 12.05%. And as per their DRHP, the reason for their extraordinary financials is the increase in capacity, economies of scale, vertical integration, diversification, and China Plus One policy. All of these factors have helped Vari grow exponentially. If this is very, very clear to you, let's move on to the next section, and that are the challenges that this company is facing in the Indian solar industry. People, the first challenge that Vari is facing is the decrease in price of solar modules. So globally, if you check the cost of solar panels and solar products in general, they have dropped by 5 times. If you see this graph, the price of solar modules have reduced by 95%, going from $1.78 per watt to just $0.096 per watt. And this is from 2010 to August 2024. And as these prices keep on dropping, the profits will go down and the competition will increase. Secondly, the Chinese companies and their dumping strategy can make things even worse in the future for Waaree. And lastly, even today, Waaree Energies is procuring 70% of its raw material from China. So if China starts to see Waaree as a threat, they might unleash their dumping strategy and they might specially target Waaree. And this brings us to the last question, and that is, how is the government helping the solar industry of India, and how exactly are companies like Waaree Energies benefiting from them? Well, firstly, there is a government mandate for domestic content requirement, or DCR. Long story short, so if you want to build a huge solar powered charger for your entire school and you try to get a grant from the government will want you to use parts for the charger that are built in India itself. Secondly, the government is giving away something called performance linked incentive schemes, the link to which I'll put out in the description. And lastly, the government is protecting domestic producers by imposing a heavy import duty of 40% on solar modules and 25% on solar cells. This is what the government is doing to make sure that Indian supply of solar components sustains. And when it comes to demand creation, as we saw in our rooftop episode, the government is giving away a subsidy of 78,000 rupees on solar panels costing 1.8 lakh rupees. And the government is aiming that 1 crore Indian households will buy solar panels and contribute to the Indian solar dream. So if the government is able to fulfill this target of 50% energy needs from renewable sources, it will be a dream run for the solar companies of India. And I'm just praying with all my heart that companies like Waaree, Vikram Solar and Adani Solar go on to become market leaders of the world. This is the story, the moat, the financials and the risks of a rising legend of India that goes by the name Waaree Energy. And if all goes well, it could be the Brahmastra for the Indian solar dream. And that is the reason why I thought it to be extremely important to cover Waaree Energies and to pay a tribute to the pioneers of India. And this brings us to the last part of the episode, and that are the lessons that India needs to learn from this solar revolution of the world. Lesson number 1. The power of a country doesn't lie in its ambition, but in its independence to pursue that ambition. In this case, while India and China both have their renewable energy dream, while China is racing ahead independently, India's dream is still dependent on the Chinese. And this is because while we let the solar dream slip due to lack of vision, now we need to bleed losses so that we can take charge of our destiny, both in case of solar and the EV industry. And after we are done capturing this wave, the leaders of our country need to study and find out how India can build a leverage for itself. Lesson number 2. After this wave is done, the leaders of our country need to study and find out how India can build a leverage for itself in the global economy. In this case, while the Chinese invested in solar and EV way back in 2008 and 2009, we started pursuing this dream only after 2014 and 2016. But if we repeat this act and we do not build a leverage for ourselves by 2035, India becoming a superpower will remain a distant dream. And lastly, since the government is the godfather of the market, whichever company helps the government de-risk India, that company will go on to become a major beneficiary in the Indian market. In this case, since Waaree is acting as India's Brahmastra for the Chinese dependency, it is obvious that Waaree is going to get an insane advantage in the market. This is what we need to learn from India's struggling solar dream. And I just hope you learned something valuable from this case study. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.